Welcome to my session. I'm Kevin Rushforth. This is the JavaFX 26 Today talk. And it is today. It was released today, so we'll get to that. I'm assuming most of you are familiar enough with JavaFX. I'm going to skip most of the overview, go very quickly. I just mainly put the slides in there so that when I publish them, you guys can see them if anybody is interested. I'm going to spend most of the time talking about what we've done in the last year. So I'll talk a little bit about JavaFX releases, some of the changes that we're doing, and then talk about what we had in Java 25, and then today, JavaFX 26. Show some demos and code samples, and then talk a little bit about what's coming next. And I'll try to leave some time for Q&A at the end, so let's hold questions until then, please. So I'm not going to go over the overview slides. Just main thing to note here is JavaFX is a very full-featured toolkit. It has pretty much everything you'd expect from that. And so we'll start with JavaFX releases. So if any of you have been to previous talks, you've probably seen, we release every 6 months. We release on the same cadence as JavaFX, as the JDK. And ever since JavaFX 11 was decoupled from the JDK in the JDK 11 timeframe, we have released the same numbered release of JavaFX on the same 6-month cadence that the JDK has. And so 6 months ago in September, we released JavaFX 25. Today, we released JavaFX 26 along with JDK 26. And just like the JDK is, we use a train model. We have a development period. We have a ramp down period. If your feature makes it in, it gets in. If it doesn't, catches the next train in 6 months. So one of the things that's a little different today is that with today's announcement of the Java verified portfolio, we are now fully embracing the tip and tail model. We actually had made changes over the last 2, maybe 3 years to more closely align with that. What we do is we expect that the current JavaFX, which today is 26 and yesterday was 25, you run that with the same version of the JDK. So go download JDK 26, go download JavaFX 26. They're meant to work together. And the tip and tail model is one that was put out by Oracle a little while ago as an informational JEP. And the basic idea is pretty simple. If you want the latest features, go to the latest feature release. Grab a companion library like JavaFX that is designed to work with that latest feature release. And so that is where you go to get that, is jdk.java.net or from your provider of Java or JavaFX. And every 6 months, you're going to get a new version. And Oracle will provide 2 security updates and bug fix updates, CPU releases. And then it sunsets with the next feature release. And so if you're on the tip, you go from 25 to 26 to 27 to 28, getting new features, bug fixes, improvements. If you're an enterprise customer and you want stability, that's where you end up wanting to use what we're calling the tail release. And to do that, you take a version of Java and JavaFX, again, you want the same version, from your provider of Java and JavaFX, and use them together. In the case of JavaFX, we provide binaries now from Oracle that are supported, and Gluon provides binaries. I'm sure other vendors provide binaries as well. And that's sort of the general model that we're now following. So now I want to talk about some of the features that we've added in the last 2 releases, meaning since the last year's JavaOne. In September, as I mentioned, we released JavaFX 25, and that had a number of enhancements and small features and bug fixes. Some of the highlights were that we released a new preview feature. So the first 2 are not final features, meaning that one of them's a preview feature, one of them's an incubating API. And if you're familiar with those in the JDK, we follow the same model, meaning it can change from release to release, even incompatibly, because what we're trying to do is gain feedback before we have to finalize it and freeze it. We take compatibility seriously, just like the JDK does. And so we tell you very explicitly, and you have to opt in saying, yes, I understand that I'm using non-final APIs. And so when you go from Java 25 and JavaFX 25 to 26, you may have to change for those first 2. Controls in the title bar is a preview feature first introduced in JDK 25. We made some improvements to a previously introduced incubating feature. And then we added a few text optimizations as well as a CSS media query feature that I'll talk about in a bit. JavaFX 26, which released earlier today, has, again, a few features, small features, enhancements, and bug fixes, and a few other interesting things that we've done. So improvements to the 2 non-final APIs were done. We also added a Metal rendering pipeline on macOS. So for those who are familiar, Metal is Apple's primary graphics API that they've been pushing for years. They deprecated OpenGL a little while ago, and so we now have an optional off-by-default Metal rendering pipeline. We provided a headless window toolkit that I'll talk about in a little bit, and some improvements in CSS animations, and an improvement in the CSS media features. And then a couple of other smaller enhancements that I probably won't talk about those much unless somebody has a question at the end. So let's start with some of the JavaFX 25 features. One thing that's been missing is we had even before rich text, we had ways that you could programmatically compose your own rich text with something called text flow. It's a layout container and a container of text nodes that allows you to actually place different pieces of text with different fonts, and they would seamlessly flow. It doesn't give you a lot of control over there, which is why we did rich text that I'll talk about later. But one thing that's been missing is you can't position tabs geometrically. In a text line, you really want your tab stops to be independent of any particular font, or if you're using a proportional font, you don't want it to lay out differently if you have a bunch of wide characters versus a bunch of little eyes. And that's what happens today because we use character-based fixed number of characters for tab stops. So the tab stop policy allows you to define the tab stops geometrically, add them to your text flow, and it flows as you would expect. And that's just a little sample that shows how that's done. We also added some other improvements in text, some missing things from earlier APIs. We found some missing geometric APIs to get caret shapes and range shapes, as well as we fixed a few bugs in those, and then we added a proper text layout object. So you can get a snapshot of what the text layout is for any text or text flow node. CSS media feature query is a standard CSS feature that was missing in JavaFX, and so we added that to be able to query preferences and aspects of your scene and then make conditional decisions in your CSS styling based on that. An example of that is the preferences of light or dark mode, or whether or not you want reduced transparency. And then for scene size, which was added in 26, you can do it based on width, height, or aspect ratio. And that shows an example of CSS code that does that. In JavaFX, I think it was 24, we started adding support for CSS animations. And the missing piece that was added in 26 was linear easing functions. And the nice thing about this, there's a whole bunch of built-in functions, and then there's some spline functions that you can use. But what was missing is the ability to define your own function. And the way CSS has you do that is using a piecewise linear easing function. And so with that, if you define enough linear segments, you can approximate any easing function you want. And so this is just a simple example of an easing function that it speeds up and slows down, and then it bounces a little bit when it gets to the end. And so you'll see that here in a second if you watch. So I don't know that anybody would use this exact function, but it just shows the idea of what is possible now that wasn't before. So as I mentioned, OpenGL is deprecated by Apple. It's not going to go away anytime soon, but Apple has certainly shown that they're not afraid of getting rid of things. Support for Intel architecture is going away in a couple of years. And if I had to guess, after that happens, they might start thinking, well, now that we only have our own pipeline, everything's Apple Silicon. Maybe this is the time to do that. Even before they do that, I suspect what they'll do, probably are already starting it now or thinking about it, is emulate OpenGL on top of Metal. And so we need to be ready for this. What happens in JavaFX 26 is we put in a pipeline, it's off by default. If for some reason it can't load the OpenGL pipeline, it will fall back to Metal. But otherwise, the only way to enable it is with a system property. Sorry. Oh, no. Okay. Yeah, Metal is off by default. OpenGL is on by default. You can enable Metal with a system property in 26. And it will be enabled by default in a future release. We also put in a headless window toolkit. This is a prototype. So you have to enable it with a pair of command line options. And if you get them wrong, it might not do what you think it should do. But it's a way to get feedback. It's fully functional with a, as long as you stay within the lanes that it sets out for you. And it allows you to do easy testing so that you can test on machines that might not even have a graphics card, or you don't have to care what graphics card it is. It's platform independent, so the same code will run on Mac, Windows, or Linux without worrying about drivers or Windows systems. It means it can run on a server or in the cloud. And it can be used for generating print images or other things that you might want to do, where you render your scene graph image or through a JavaFX canvas on a server and then save an image. So we'd like to get some feedback for developers on all of our new features. So you'll probably see that bullet on most of the ones, so I'll not talk to it anymore, but anything where it's not a final feature, we'd like feedback. A new feature in JavaFX 26 is the ability to have controls in the title bar. I mentioned that briefly in the slide. It actually came out initially in 25, but it's been improved in 26. And so what that allows you to do is take what used to be a very fixed, the application shall draw here in the window, then there's a title bar drawn by the application, and the application shall not draw there. With the extended stage style and header bar, you can now draw inside the title bar, and I'll show an example of that in a bit. But it provides, by it, I mean JavaFX provides through the system the default window buttons, so the close, the minimize, the maximize, iconify. Those are all provided by the system, and they're different and appropriate for your system. They'll be on the correct side, right or left, depending on what your system is configured for. And the header bar will automatically adjust for that. The improvements that we've made in some cases have been not compatible changes. So in particular, there was some API that they realized was a mistake in a couple of different ways. One of them was the properties were on the wrong object. They should have been attached properties because they weren't really properties of the header bar, they're attached properties of the stage. And then also we didn't have support for dialogues with extended stage. And so this is a simple example code. The important parts of this are to realize that you set your stage style to be the right type. So instead of a decorated or undecorated stage, you would say extended, and that's what gets you this. And then you put a header bar at the top of your window. So you usually use a border pane, plop your header bar at the top, and it'll size itself correctly. And that allows you to have this look and feel where you don't have any gap between them. We added rich text previously, and it's an incubating feature. We're still incubating it. The motivation for doing it's pretty simple. It's a very common thing to want to do. We had a couple of different ways to do it prior to this. We had the text flow, which gave you very limited control, but you could piece it together if you were patient enough. And then we had a web view-based HTML editor control, which was it was at the same time too limited and too heavyweight. So it just was not suitable. And so that's why we ended up doing this. We don't offer a full rich text editor. We offer the building blocks for it and a sample demo that you can take code from, be inspired by, do whatever with, because it's under BSD as an example program. Some of the improvements that we've made are, again, incompatible. The biggest one being that we added support for input method editors. And then there was also support for CSS styling, as well as just some some missing APIs that are random and bunches of bug fixes. So we deliver a rich editor demo app that shows and highlights a lot of the capabilities of it, as well as being a good starting point that you could use for an app. And so I am going to demo this and show the capabilities. You have editable styled text. You can select, copy, paste, and with the toolbar that we've added in the app, you can control all of the things that the API gives you. So the toolbar itself is not something that's part of the standard API. That's part of the app, but it allows you to control all of these attributes of rich text and do things like apply styles to a portion of the text or change the color, the kinds of things you would expect to do with an editor, although realize this is a demo. This is not Microsoft Word. Not going to show code area today. I showed this last year. We haven't changed it too much. What it is a subclass of RichTextArea that allows you to do decorated text that would be suitable for an IDE or a notebook style application. Anything where what you're really trying to display is fixed text monospaced code, and you might want to apply different styles based on some aspect of it. So for example, if you're in an IDE and you have Java code, you'll want to do syntax highlighting, or there might be some other things that you could do similar to that. And so you have a pluggable highlighter that you can add in. We only showed this last year as a proof of concept. We don't really have a notebook app that's underlying this, but what we do have is all of the building blocks for the visual aspects of a notebook style app in JavaFX. And then just to show how easy it is to do, our mantra has always been for something like this, we want to keep simple things simple and make difficult things possible. Some difficult things we even only do by allowing you to extend it. But in this case, sort of the simplest basic thing you might want to do is take your boring black text, single font, single spacing text field, or text area in this case, and you might want to add some styles to it. And so the code that does it is very simple. This is just a subset of the program, but the basic idea is we use the builder pattern to build and code up styles, and you can derive styles from other ones. So we'll define a default one, everything else is derived from that, and we just add in the pieces we need, in this case bold, and there's a color bold that I didn't show, but it's exactly the same pattern. And so the two main methods for interacting with rich text are append text to add new text at a various point or at the end, and then apply style if you want to change anything. Apply style works by merging by default with whatever's already there. So if you have a bunch of bold text, some red text that's not bold, and some text in a different font, and you select the whole thing and say, now apply italics to this whole thing or underline the whole thing, it will do that and merge it and keep track of all of that, as you'd expect from a rich text editor to do that. Now, I will now show a couple of demos. So let me just hide that for a minute. So first, I wanted to show a demo before we get into the RichTextArea demo of the extended stage. So again, nothing visually very compelling about that. The most important thing to note is that it lines up on the same part of the screen as the standard window buttons, and those are active window buttons provided by, in this case, Mac OS. Yep. And the toggle color button is an active button. I can't drag it because it's a button, but I can drag anywhere else in the color that's not the standard Windows System windows or my buttons. So now I'm going to show RichTextArea via the rich text editor demo I was mentioning. So one of the things that it allows you to do, this is, you can't see it, but whoops, let me cancel that. But this is actually Microsoft Word right here. So But what I'm showing here is copying, pasting from Microsoft Word to our rich text editor demo. And it does that because Microsoft Word puts data on the clipboard in rich text format, and that's one of the formats we understand. So every time you do a paste, we look for what's on the clipboard, various MIME types. We'll first look for, is there a native JavaFX RichTextArea chunk on there or MIME type on there? Nope, let's now look for rich text. And I think there's even an input plugin for HTML. That one, I didn't feel bold enough to demo it because I'm not sure how well tested that one is. But the three that are really well tested are the native one, rich text format, and of course, plain text. So you can do all of that in there. And having done that, let me load in another one, the one that, yeah, I'm going to discard those changes. I don't need them anymore. So this shows a bunch of things, emojis, different overlapping styles. And I can select that and strike through everything or not. And it remembers the old style. So it's pretty simple concept, but so, if I want to make that Arial and bold, and I can't read that. My eyes are getting too small, or too old, and so there's the size I like to see a little better. So again, this is available in our repo. So we don't actually produce this as an app. It's just sample code, but it's in our repository. Feel free to grab it, play with it, do whatever you want with it. And I'll discard that. Okay, so in summary on the RichTextArea, it is a full-featured, ready-to-use in your app component. It's just that the API is not finalized because we know that there are still some rough edges, and we're continuing to get feedback. We actually have gotten 3 or 4 people developing applications that have given us good feedback so far, and we're hoping to get more. This is a complex enough feature with a large enough API surface. It's going to take a few releases to get it right, to make sure we're ready to commit to the API that we put in. What I guess we're asking everybody to do is download it and try it in your app. Okay, so everything I've talked about and shown so far is shipping today with JavaFX 26. Now we'll start talking about a few things that may not ship for a while. Some of them are under development. So right now, the mainline repo is open up for JavaFX 27 development. Same as the JDK, whenever we get to the point where we're stabilizing the previous release, you can start working on the next one. It's going to be released in September. We don't have an exact date. Once the JDK publishes their schedule, we'll have an exact date. This is an example of a few of the features we're working on. The only thing I can say about this list is some of these will make it. And I can almost guarantee that not all of these will make it. This is just a list of things we're working on. They're in various stages of development. You remember earlier I said we were in a future release going to switch Metal to default. We did it. So JavaFX 27, if you download the early access ones, and I'll show you that in a minute, and you won't be able to tell. I had even forgotten it happened because it just looks the same, and that's the point. It'll run faster, be more stable, and then long-term it will still be there when Apple yanks OpenGL. So we felt that this was the right time. So we turned it on by default very early in 27, and so all EA builds are going to have that, and our intention is to release it. Everything else on here is just in various stages of development. Some of them are out for review. Some of them are in concept design, and it's just a collection of things that we're working on. So a couple of things on RichTextArea. I actually will talk a little bit about the tab stop policy. You remember we added that into TextFlow. Well, we're adding it into RichTextArea. That one is out for review, and I'll show a demo of it running. And the other things will, some of them will make it, some won't. So this is the same thing as anything else. If you go to jdk.java.net, you'll get early access builds of both JDK and JavaFX, along with the production-ready builds of 26. So we'll give you a sneak peek of that tab stop policy. It's going to look pretty similar to what happened with TextFlow, except we have a sample application that will allow you to do it graphically, and sample application that you can pull code from. The only thing that, or one thing that this found, and this is another reason why we wanted to incubate this, is because we found something that was missing. There was no ability or capability to provide document-wide attributes in the rich text model. There were paragraph attributes, and most of the things you want are either paragraph or character attributes. We actually found the first need, and this I'm sure won't be the last, for document-wide, and so that had to be. The default tab stop policy is document-wide, but everything else about tab stops is a paragraph attribute. So I think I'll switch and run another demo. So this one's early access code, and I have to be careful because when I was running it and testing it earlier, a few things don't work quite right, but it's in really good shape, so I feel comfortable enough demoing it. So the main thing we have here, let me do that. So the first line is just a bunch of vertical bars, or symbols, just showing where the default tab stops are, just because my eyes can't see it otherwise. And so we've got this, and they both use default tab stops. And these two have tab stops that are set. Right now they're set to the same thing, but if I were to grab that, that can move independently, so can that. I can add a new tab stop there, or I can delete it. And then I can go here and also make changes. And then it allows you to just say, no, I'm going to sync this up so that now both of them use the same one again. So it's the kind of thing, again, you'd expect from a pretty basic text editor that isn't trying to be Microsoft Word. But I think that's probably most of what I wanted to show here. Just like we wanted to do a new rendering pipeline for Apple, we also want to do one for Windows. Unlike Apple, Windows has not claimed that Direct3D 9 is deprecated, but it is no longer being supported. So it's considered legacy from Microsoft. So they haven't threatened to yank it, but it's not being improved. And in a lot of newer systems, I believe it's emulated on top of one of the later Direct3Ds. It's very similar. Direct3D 9 and OpenGL are kind of at a similar higher level. Metal and Vulkan, as well as Direct3D 12, are all more lower level down to the hardware. And so we have a Direct3D 12 pipeline. It's being developed in a sandbox. And we have early access builds available right now on jdk.java.net. We've put out 2 early access builds. We've addressed all of the feedback as well as a couple of additional things, and we're doing the final testing and polishing for our 3rd and final early access. So once we get the feedback from that, it'll be ready to go back into mainline. And so the question is when? Well, when it's ready. We don't know whether it'll make 27 or 28, but it'll go in when it's ready. It depends, a lot of it depends on what kind of feedback we get for the 3rd early access. So some of the things we do on an ongoing basis are a number of bug fixes, both internally discovered and from the community. And a lot of the ones from the community, we are happy to accept pull requests if there's a good quality associated with them. We've integrated many fixes from the community. We do platform support. We have to continually update different OSs. Every time we get a new version of Mac OS or a new version of Linux, there's always something that goes on. Windows tends to be a little bit more compatible, but even then the change from Windows 11 to 10, or sorry, 10 to 11 ended up coming up with a couple of things. And so we end up fixing some critical bugs at every new release. We do updates to third-party libraries. So as with the JDK, JavaFX has several native third-party libraries, and we have to keep them up to date for performance, bug fixes, and security fixes. And then we do, as you saw from the previous slides on JavaFX 25 and 26, we do various small enhancements and other improvements. And then we're going to be continuing to evolve the RichTextArea. At some point, we'd like to get it into a state where it's ready to finalize, but We won't know when that is until we get to a point where there's no more churn in the API. We need stability where we're not saying, oh, I guess we need to change that API to fix this bug or add that new improvement. That's when we'll know it's ready. And other possible ideas, the Wakefield project, which is adding a native Wayland toolkit for the client libraries in AWT, we're monitoring that and hope to be able to leverage and take a lot of that work for JavaFX. It's making good progress. The IntelliJ folks at JetBrains are even putting out versions of the JDK of their own JDK to run with IntelliJ that have it enabled. But right now we support X-Wayland, and so it's still fully compatible with, if you have a Wayland-only display server, JavaFX will still run on that today, but eventually we'd like to get the benefits of going to a native one. We did some work a while back on a JavaFX notebook prototype. And out of that work, we're actually not right now pursuing our own notebook. Rather, we'll look at how we can integrate in with what the Visual Studio Code folks have done and other events. But out of that came some really good ideas to align more with Project Amber, which is just some easier to use, easier ways to teach students and new developers how to use it. And so we're still hoping we can, now that we've gotten a lot of the underpinnings, with the new OpenGL and Direct3D pipelines and some of the other work on RichTextArea, we're now hoping we can focus on that a little bit. I doubt we're going to do the last two, especially the image writing APIs. The interop between FX and Swing is good enough that we haven't really felt a need. And another thing that I actually mentioned this last year, in JavaFX 24, we put in something that, at least for image reading, will fall back to actually using ImageIO. So if you have an ImageIO plugin and we don't have a native thing in JavaFX, it'll just read it. You want to read a TIFF file, it'll just work. So that kind of takes the pressure off of this now. And these are more far future ideas, with the possible exception of a couple of the early media ones that we might do. These are things that keep coming up, but so far we haven't had any compelling reason to want to do them, and that's desktop platform integration, like a Docker framework. We might do something like that. Multi-resolution image support would be a nice thing to have, and a bunch of media features. The first couple, as I said, we might end up doing. And then the last question is really one for you. What would you like to see in JavaFX? So my call to action for all of you is download JDK 26 and JavaFX 26 today, like right after the conference. No, come to the happy hour, then right after the happy hour, go do that. At the same place you get it, though, you can download 27 early access if you want to kick the tires. And then you can file bugs or join the mailing list and continue the conversation there. So we have a few other sessions. We have a lot of other sessions at JavaOne, but there's a few that I'll highlight. I guess I would call it the technical keynote from Brian Getz is tomorrow afternoon. And that's at 4:15 in the auditorium. And then 3 sessions on Thursday. There's the community keynote in the morning, which is a really good way to see what's going on in the Java community. And then my colleague Phil Race has a talk on Java Client, how they're doing, what they're working on now, and some of the new things they're looking at. And the closing session of this conference will be the Ask the Architects panel. And so with that, I think I will open it up for questions. We have some time. And I'll leave these links up here if anybody wants to take a look at them while we have questions. So, yes.
Did you make any improvements to?
There we go.
The JavaFX charts. Are there any improvements to that, or new charts? Or?
Not yet. That's if you probably saw, that was one of the things on the previous slide that I didn't talk about. Let me go back to it. It's, we would like to see, so under possible ideas here, so that, I guess it was one more back from that. Improvements to charts. We actually have started to take a look at that. Nothing concrete right now, but it's something that we know is a deficit. Did you have anything in mind?
I think zooming in and zooming out with the charts, I don't think you can do that, right?
So more improved, so more interactive
More
ways
interactive
of
things by the user.
zooming it out. So not so much different chart types, but better ways to interact with our current charts.
Right.
Okay, that's something we can look at. Any other questions? All right, one back here.
On that notebook item, you mentioned
Right.
some inspiration from Amber. Are you talking about?
I'm just talking about the paving the on-ramp stuff more
okay,
than Amber itself. It's really more about the paving the on-ramp work.
Mm-hmm. So is there specific things in JavaFX
It's
that are connected to that idea?
a little
that
bit.
feature?
So the main thing we found with the notebook is the last thing you want people to do, just like you don't want people to learn about classes. Well, we have to have people learn not only about classes, but a specific type of subclass of JavaFX. And then, oh, you have to call this method to get started, and make sure you do everything on the right thread. So some of that is, we're looking at ways to maybe make that a little easier for applications to get started.
Got it.
And then the other would be just some utilities, because, so taking the example of charts, they're very powerful, but to actually get started, you have to write a number of lines of code and interact with classes that you wonder, why do I have to interact with that? I just want to show a 2D line chart. And so things like that are more what we were thinking of there. Yes?
So it's been a while since I've been to JavaOne. The last JavaOne I went to, this is back in the Java 11 days, where Oracle knew it was going to be supported to the year 2026. Here we're at 2026. So what's your guess on, is Oracle going to continue support JavaFX?
Oh, for JavaFX, actually, that's what we announced today with Java Verified Portfolio. So Donald Smith, who just left the room about 5 minutes ago during the Q&A, he had somewhere to go, also wrote a blog describing what our new support policy is for that. So the short answer is JavaFX is going to be supported for every LTS release from, supporting JDK 17 through JavaFX 21, because we hadn't adopted the tip and tail yet. But for every release from there, from JavaFX 21 forward, LTS releases will be supported for the 5-year premier support period of the JDK going forward.
I guess, what's your prediction for, as we go into the future, for 28, 29, do you think Oracle will still continue?
Well, that was the announcement. Yeah, yes, I do, because I don't think we would have announced that because right now we're saying that Java 25 is going to be, JavaFX 25 is going to be supported until 2030. That's actually published on our website. If you go to the Java Verified Portfolio page, in fact, I happen to have it up right here. And so if we go to the support roadmap, right there, 25 LTS till September of 2030. And these are the proposed dates for after that. So the proposed date for 29 is September of 2032, and so on. So, oh yeah, that's, yes. So we had pulled, if you were following along, we had pulled JavaFX out of JDK 8 and made it available only on demand in customer builds. We're now putting it back in until March of 2028.
Can you explain that a little bit?
Sure.
You're saying if you download the JDK, you automatically
No, it's still unbundled. Okay, I'll repeat the question. Oh, do you want to repeat it? Okay, I will be happy to repeat the question. Does that mean JavaFX is bundled in the JDK again? I'll paraphrase, no. For 8 it is, so that's why I said put back in. It was only ever in JDK 8 and earlier. Well, it was for 9 and 10, but those weren't LTS releases. So from 11 and later, JavaFX is still delivered as an unbundled. That doesn't mean someday we might not provide a bundle that has them together. But because it has a shorter support timeline, it has the 5-year timeline of Premier rather than extended support. That's at least the current plan. Other questions? Okay, well, thank you. That's I think that was my last slide. Yes, yes, it was. So thank you.